Hi everybody! As promised, here is a review video about the unit so far before you take your quiz this week. So far from the practice quizzes that I've been looking at for 5th and 6th period so far, you guys seem to be doing well. Keep checking on your practice quizzes because as they get turned in, I have been putting comments so that you can tell if you're on the right track or not, and you can get lots of feedback before you take the quiz. I designed the practice quiz to have elements of everything that should come up on the real quiz. So if you do well on the practice quiz, I hope that you'll do well on the real quiz. Both are worth some credit, so be sure to get that practice quiz in because it is important that you do it and assess how well you understand the material before you take that quiz. So let's get into what topics are covered, okay? So I'm gonna take you on a look through the practice test. Make sure you've done the practice test before you're watching this. So if you haven't done the practice test, push pause, go back, do the practice test, and then come back to this, okay? All right, so here is the practice quiz. You should be familiar with it, and I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about it. So the first thing you notice is we have a food web, and in the quiz there are going to be lots of food webs. So it's important that you understand how to get information from the food webs. So we know that it's telling us that the alligator population decreased. Also from this we can tell who eats what, right? We know that the alligator eats the gar population because the energy from the gar is going to the alligators, shown by this arrow right here. The next thing we know is that the crabs are eaten by the gar because their energy storage molecules are going from the crab to the gar, shown by this arrow. And then lastly, we know that diving ducks also eat the crabs because of this arrow showing energy storage molecules going to the duck. So it's important that you understand the layout of the food web because food webs are going to be very important in this quiz. The next thing I want to point out is that you know about consumer and resource populations. So it's important for you to know which ones in this web are consumers and who they're consumers of, and who are the resource populations and who they are resources for. So for example, the gar population is a resource population for the alligators. The gar are eaten by the alligators. And in that regard, the alligators are consumer populations for the gar. Now the gar also could be a consumer population of the crab. The gar consume and eat the crab. In this case, the crab would be a resource population for the gar. So in this scenario, when you get down to this question down at the bottom, let's see here, it says, name a consumer population for crabs and a resource population for alligators. You might notice that one of these things is both of those answers, right? Okay. That would be the gar population, right? It is the resource population of the alligators, and it is the consumer population of the crabs. Another important thing to be clear on before the quiz is about how births and deaths affect changes in populations. So if a population is increasing, like we have here in question 2, what would a decrease in the population mean for the number of births and deaths? So if the alligator population is decreasing, that means there are fewer individuals in the population, and that could be caused by an increase in death or a decrease in birth, right? So it's important that you get those clear. I know a few folks are still a little bit fuzzy on using that increase and decrease. So just work through it slowly. None of the questions are meant to trip you up or trick you, but just really think about what happens if this population, the alligator population, is decreasing, what that means for births and deaths. So more deaths, fewer births. And then if this is decreasing, what would that mean for the gar population? So the gar are their food, and if the alligators aren't around to eat their food, what might that mean for the gar population? It would mean they're going to go up, right? They're not getting eaten. Their deaths are going down. So they might be able to have more births, right? So this population would go up. And anything that happens to this population is going to affect the next population down, the crab population. So if the gar population has increased, that means there are more gar eating crabs. What might happen to the crab population? It would go down, right? They're getting more energy from the crabs and they're getting eaten, right? That population is going down. Now, if the crab population goes down, what does that mean for the diving ducks? There's going to be less food for the diving duck population, and so their population would not have enough energy storage molecules to survive. So either their deaths would increase or their reproduction would decrease. They don't have enough energy storage molecules to reproduce, and so their births would decrease, causing an overall decrease in population. So the reason we map these things out in food webs is because they can get quite complicated, and you're talking about increase and decrease, and it's really important we use these models to show what we're talking about so that we can keep everything clear in our minds. So get familiar with these food webs. It's going to be important on the quiz. So I'm going to show you one more example and we'll walk through it together. That'll be really important, that just shows the level of understanding you're going to need for the quiz. Okay, so this is a different scenario. We'll work through it together. It says, in the Arctic region, polar bears eat seals, and seals eat cod, a type of fish. In the last 7 years, the sizes of all the populations stayed stable, and recently the size of the bear population decreased. What will likely happen to the cod population? So all of that information is also shown in this food web. So we see here that there's a polar bear population. It says it decreased. And we have our arrows here, so we know that the polar bears eat the seals, right? Because the energy storage molecules from the seals are going to the polar bears. And the seals are eating the codfish population, right? Because the energy storage molecules are going from the cod to the seals. So we know all of that from this food web. Now we're trying to see what the effect of the polar bear population decreasing is going to have all the way on the cod population. So let's think about that for a second. If the polar bear population is decreasing, what does that mean for the number of births and deaths? A decrease in population means that there are fewer births than deaths, right? Are you with me? So if there are fewer births than deaths in the polar bear population, it's going down. Now, if this population goes down, the consumer population for seals, right? They eat seals. Then this seal population would likely increase, right? They're not getting eaten as much, so they're able to have more births than deaths. The number of deaths has been reduced because they're not getting eaten by these polar bears. So in this instance, between the polar bear and the seal population would increase. Now, if we take it a step further, between the seal population and the cod population, if we've had an increase in seals, what would that mean for the cod population? There are more seals eating cod, right? So they're getting a lot more energy storage molecules from this population. So that would mean that the cod population is going to decrease, right? These guys, big population, really hungry, they're going to decrease that cod population, and there will be more deaths, more of them will be getting eaten than born. Does that make sense? So let's look at the options for our responses here. So if the polar bear population decreases, what will happen to the cod population? Now, that was not the correct answer there. Don't jump to conclusions. It was just the one that was selected. So let's read through these together. The size of the cod population will decrease. So if the polar bear decreases, what will happen to the cod? It will decrease. A decrease in the size of one population leads to a decrease in the size of all other populations in an ecosystem. Now let's think about if that's correct. So the polar bears went down. We talked about that. Then the sea lions increased because they're not getting eaten as much. And then they're eating a lot, so the cod population is going to go down. So the decrease part is correct. This says that the size of one population leads to a decrease in sizes of all other populations. Well, that's not true, right? Because we just said if the polar bear population goes down, then the seal population will go up. So it can't be A. So a decrease, let's talk about B, a decrease. The smaller polar bear population will lead to more seals. Sounds right so far. We just talked about that. The larger seal population will need more energy storage molecules to reproduce, so they will eat more cod. This will lead to more deaths than births in the cod population. So that's essentially what we were just talking about, right? So fewer polar bears, more seals. All those seals are hungry, eating more cod, more deaths in the cod population, it's going to decrease. That sounds pretty correct to me. Let's check the other ones out, make sure we're not missing anything. Will the cod population stay the same? The polar bears do not eat cod, so the number of births and deaths in the cod population will stay the same. Well, the polar bears don't eat the cod, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the number of births and deaths in the cod population will stay the same. We just talked about how the number of deaths will increase, so that one can't be correct. Now this last one, the smaller polar bear population will leave more energy storage molecules available in the ecosystem for the cod population, so there will be more births in the cod population. Now that sort of seems correct on the surface, that polar bears would be leaving more energy storage molecules in the population, but those energy storage molecules are all seals, and the seals are eating the cod, so that can't be correct either. So I would go back to our initial response here, B, decrease. So I hope that makes sense to you. And the way that we have talked about this, we've talked about births and deaths. We've talked about energy storage molecules. We talked about reproduction. We talked about consumer populations and resource populations. So those are the main concepts that you need to be able to understand in order to be successful on this quiz. Okay, if you have any questions at all, please be sure to reach out to me. I'm happy to Zoom with you if you're confused at all, or send you an email, or send you links to other resources. I really want you to be successful on this quiz. So study hard, do the practice test, check back for feedback on it to make sure you're on the right track. And if I send something back and it has comments and you're still not sure, please get in touch with me, okay? We can get through this, and I will help you get the understanding that you need before you take the quiz. Once you decide that you're ready to take the quiz, you can take it, but you can only submit it the once. So make sure that you're fully prepared, you feel like you've got good understanding before you go ahead and try and take that quiz, okay? It's just a single submission. All right, I think you guys are gonna do great from all of the responses and the homework from last week. It sounds like you guys are all on the right track, but be sure to read your comments in all of your assignments. I take a lot of time to give you feedback that hopefully will be helpful, and you'll be able to get a lot from it, okay? So Take care, guys. I miss seeing you all the time. Good luck on this quiz. And again, let me know if you have any questions. All right, take care.